Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pat Monticelli with the Broomfield Area Chamber, and we're glad you're here for this community conversation on the Broomfield Town Square project. The project has generated a lot of interest, a lot of questions, and understandably, a lot of curiosity across our business community and our residents. Our goal today is simple. We want to provide a clear, straightforward update on where the project stands today. We want to talk about what steps remain before construction begins, and we'd like to discuss what the community can realistically expect moving forward. A couple of quick notes before we get underway. This is a moderated conversation today. It is not a live Q&A. The goal today is clarity and understanding, and we've worked in advance to ensure that this is a productive, informative session. We are grateful to have representatives from both the development team and the City and County of Broomfield with us today. With the development team are Tim Frederigo from Outpost Partners, along with Joe Vostris from City Street Investors, and City and County of Broomfield's City Manager, Jennifer Hoffman. Thank you all for being here today. With that, we will go ahead and get started. So what I'd like to do is start at a high level and make sure that everyone understands where things are, where things stand today. So Tim and Joe, I'll start with you first. Can you start us off with a simple big picture update? Where does the Town Square project stand today, and what major milestones have already been completed?
Well, thank you very much, Pat, and thank you for putting this together. We're very excited to be here and talk about this and the project, and grateful for everyone's interest, and love talking about the project. So let's. I think, though, to answer your question, we have to start with just a quick refresher course on what the project is. That would be helpful to put in context. So, City Street Investors, my company, was originally retained by the City and County of Broomfield to help them formulate a plan for a potential downtown. And so we agreed to help them. And over the course of almost a year, we did an amazing research into the community. We met with hundreds of people. We held focus groups. We did hundreds upon hundreds of surveys, and really ended up with a massive amount of data that we finished into a report that we gave to the city. And this had many, many elements in it about uses and qualities and characteristics. But the most important ones that we have to remember is that the citizens asked for, first and foremost, a really transformative project that was iconic. In other words, they wanted something that if you saw a picture of this project in a postcard or a magazine, you would immediately say, that's Broomfield, Colorado. It had to have that quality. The second quality is that it had to be beautiful, public art, and all sorts of great architecture. And it had to be a place to linger, a place where you could spend hours of time. There had to be all those qualities and characteristics that you just it wouldn't be transactional. There'd be many, many things to do here that could capture your attention all day, all night. And they wanted local merchants only. We wanted local restaurants, no chains, local chefs, local restaurants, local retail was a mandate. And there was also a mandate for residential, and in particular, residential that would serve some of the older residents who maybe want to downsize out of their single family house and not have to leave Broomfield. So we put that whole report together and then recommended that to the city that the next step would be to conduct a design competition. And so we did that, and there were four very reputable, well-known land planning firms that participated, and we did a big presentation. And at the end of the presentation, the city selected the plan that was done by Civitas, which was a plan that included a lake at the heart of it for waterfront retail and restaurants and some residential above. Everybody loved the plan and said, let's move forward with this plan. And at that point, the city could have done whatever they wanted. They could have issued an RFP or got other developers involved, but they asked us, you guys did all the work. We'd love for you to develop this. And so we agreed we would try and take it on. Ultimately brought in my partner here, Tim, and his company, which was Millender White, but is now Outpost Partners. And we began a long journey together with the city as our partners to get this project going. This is an immensely complicated project. It's 40 acres of green space, only of which about 10% are our buildings. The footprints of what we're developing are really a very small part of it. Most of it is public realm. There's a lake, there's boathouses, beaches, there's public restrooms, there's plazas with pop jets. There's the Broomfield Steps, which is sort of an iconic connection between the site and the old Safeway building. And we have spent many years and millions of dollars advancing that plan. Like I said, it's by far one of the most complex that I've ever seen. And in the beginning of this year, we submitted $30 million of construction permits to the city, which the city has now and is working on. And we'd love to build this thing. We're ready to go. We want to build it. We're ready to build it, but we've had a glitch. And the glitch is that we have a site development plan that is approaching 3 years of age. And our lenders, investors, potential bondholders have said that we need to know that the entitlements are secure before we lend or invest. And so we had thought that the $30 million of work that we submitted was going to be sufficient to make the site development plan irrevocable. But we were advised by the city in January that no, it doesn't do that. And the minute that that information was known, our potential lenders and bondholders said, "Whoa, slow down. We're not going to be able to move this forward and advance the money necessary to build the project unless you get this site development issue squared away." So we've submitted that request to the city so that we can move forward. And that's where we are today. But we are ready to do this first $30+ million worth of construction. And we just need to get over this hump so that we can have the money in place to make it go. So that's where we are today. Anything you want to add, Tim?
Yeah, and as far as what has been done to date on the project, I would say, Pat, that virtually, if not literally, every single agreement necessary for advancing the project has been completed, executed, voted on, and finalized it, and meaning it's recorded and ready to go. And that includes first and foremost our redevelopment and reimbursement agreement. That's our public finance agreement, which outlines what the project is, the conceptual site plan, including the lake, the tenant mix objective for these local cool retailers that Joe spoke to, our operations and maintenance agreement with the city, fairly extensive document, very well thought out when it comes to lake operations, lake safety, cleanliness, activation, all of the things necessary to operate this future heart of Broomfield. Our improvement agreement, or sometimes they're referred to as subdivision improvement agreements, that outlines the sequencing of the various phases of public infrastructure delivery. We formed the first business improvement district in the history of the city and county of Broomfield, which is a significant milestone. Additionally, just recent progress includes advancing leasing to solidify the programming within the Safeway building. So that's pretty exciting stuff because that's when it starts to become real. You get excited speaking to the operators who are going to be activating this place. And we got some pretty cool offerings that we're certain the citizens of Broomfield are going to be excited about: family friendly, activation, entertainment, food and beverage, local. We really don't have anything that doesn't check all of the boxes that have been laid out before us. And then, as Joe noted, these construction documents for the 40+ acres on the site there are fairly substantial. And that effort includes work with the Army Corps of Engineers for floodway improvements that will benefit the city and county of Broomfield. At the north end of our site, the northern end has had persistent drainage issues, and the park does flood in heavy rainfall events. So the city's been doing improvements upstream and downstream in collaboration with the Mile High Flood District. So we've processed those applications with the Army Corps of Engineers, including wetland studies and jurisdictional determinations and the more technical and mundane parts, but nevertheless necessary to deliver on this very visionary project and aspirational goals.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. And just for the viewers today, just because Tim and Joe are sharing a screen, just to make sure everybody knows who's talking. Joe is in the black jacket, Tim is in the white shirt, just for clarity. And thank you, gentlemen, for that. So what I'd like to do now is move that over to City Manager Hoffman. From the city's perspective, how would you describe where the project is today with the overall review and approval process?
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate you inviting and including us. It's always great to have conversations in a transparent and public setting. So we look forward to having many more of these. From the city's perspective, the project is transitioning from the approval phase into the technical review phase. The developer recently received the necessary land approvals that Joe had mentioned before, which began in 2019. And included the PUD, which is the the planned unit development. And then, of course, the site development plan, the STP, that was approved in September 23rd, which is part of the conversation that we're having now about that deadline for the 3 years to ensure that there is substantiated movement within that 3 years. These approvals establish the framework and expectations of the project for all of us to remain on the same page. The approval phase concluded at the time that we began. As soon as we approved the STP, the clock began. So through the approval phase, the city worked with the developer to establish, Tim mentioned a little bit about this, the financial framework elements to support the project. I know one of your questions that we'll talk about a little later goes into the dynamics of that financial layering in order to make the project work. And as Tim said, in the metropolitan districts, business improvement districts, and the designation of the urban renewal plan. Again, we'll talk a little bit more detail in subsequent questions. So the 3-year clock established with the STP will expire in September of 2026. Broomfield's municipal code provides that the council has the ability to consider the revocation of a site development plan upon the end date, which again is September 2026. So the current 3-year plan, and this isn't specific to BTS. This is for all developments. And it's designed really to allow the developer sufficient time to move through approval to active development. And that includes submitting construction documents, initiating infrastructure improvements, and advancing the key permits throughout that review, that 36-month process. And in this case, the developer took about 2.5 years to submit the engineering construction plans and is now requesting additional time beyond the September 2026 deadline to complete all of the remaining steps that we'll talk about in subsequent questions. Staff received the horizontal infrastructure engineering construction plans on March 23rd, so about 3 weeks ago. I was notified this morning that our construction engineering team, has approved that first round. And because of the delay in submitting the plans for review, that's really what's driving the additional 18-month extension that the developer is seeking from council. So, and it's important to note that the municipal code, that a building permit must be issued within 3 years of the site development plan approval. Infrastructure permits are issued through the engineering division, and that is reliant upon engineering plan approval. So that's what's under review right now, is the engineering plan approval. Issuing the building permits comes after the approval of the construction plans, which makes sense, right? You have to know what you're building on top of before you approve buildings to go on top of it. So again, the infrastructure permits are issued through the engineering, which is reliant upon the plan approval. So when you ask about where the process is today, the issuing the building permits comes after the approval of the construction plans. And after the infrastructure permits have been issued. So in this case, again, the developers requested an 18-month extension to the deadline to obtain the building permits. So the primary building permits would or could be for vertical construction. So horizontal is all the flat infrastructure at ground or below. Vertical is everything that is above. And it could be for construction of the new mixed use, the residential buildings, or the highly anticipated redevelopment of the Safeway building.
And thank you, Jennifer. And one item to note there is with the March submittal of our construction documents includes our boathouse and concession stand there at the lake. It's one of the amenities that we know folks are excited about, where you can rent a paddle board, a paddle boat. There'll be activation for kids programming, as well as a food and beverage patio along the lake where you can enjoy a meal, an ice cream cone, or a beverage of your choice, looking out over the water. So those building permits have been submitted as well with the March submittal set, as well as our new restroom and water treatment building. This lake is, again, intended to be clean and swimmable in perpetuity, and that takes effort. Doesn't happen on its own. So with that, we've got water treatment capabilities within the public realm here, and that's a separate building for which the building permits have also been submitted as part of that March delivery. When we circle back to timeline on the project and this 18-month extension request, again, we were a bit caught off guard by the building permit interpretation, and we just want the public to know, whoever's listening out there, that we aren't asking to delay the start of the 40 acres of site development here for 18 months. The 18-month condition is extension request is purely because of the interpretation that these private vertical developments, meaning the mixed-use projects surrounding the plaza, for instance, with the ground floor retail and the residences above, that those are what is meant by a building permit. And so those building starts lag the start of the site work. Typically in construction, you commence site work. First is demolition and mass grading of the site. Then you progress to deep utilities, water, sanitary, and storm that are typically quite a bit below the ground. In some cases here, they're over 20 feet below grade. You need to clear the way, get those deep utilities in the ground. Then you're backfilling, preparing those pads to approximate finished floor elevation for the vertical buildings that will commence. And then those buildings come out of the ground. So as soon as we sell these bonds, again, which we anticipate here in the near future, folks are going to see a heck of a lot of activity out there, lots of heavy equipment. I didn't anticipate dozens of pieces of equipment on site, so nobody will be confused that the Broomfield Town Square is moving. We got 40 acres of site work to knock out, and there's going to be some activity out there. And pardon our dust while we get things moving, but it's all part of the process to, again, prepare the pads and deliver the utilities to get these buildings going vertical.
And I appreciate all that information. I think that's great context for everybody listening to kind of understand what's happening. I believe that through your initial answers to the first question, both of you pretty much answered my second question and third question today about what the plans cover, what you submitted on behalf of the developers, and City Manager Hoffman, I appreciate you going through kind of a review on the how the review process works. I appreciate that. Was there anything else you wanted to add on the review process?
Yeah, there is actually. And so just to clarify, a typical development review process involves essentially what the developer has done now, which is submitting plans, staff provides detailed technical comments, and then the developer revising and submitting those plans. So it's definitely a back and forth. So the cycle typically repeats between 2 to 5 times, depending upon the complexity of the project and how quickly the revisions and the quality of the revisions are reviewed and completed. So for example, minimal infrastructure for a project such as a park restroom may take 2 submittals, but a moderately complex project, restaurant, with existing water and sewer connections may take 2 to 3 submittals. More complex projects, such as an apartment building or large flex industrial, may take, that has significant infrastructure improvements attached to it, may take 3 or more submittals. So with a project of this complexity, we anticipate similar to the STP, which was about 5 rounds. And for a project of this scale and complexity, including approximately 30 acres of development, a 4-acre, 12-foot man-made lake with a floodplain, as Tim had indicated before. And of course, the connections, both existing and new capital infrastructure, the engineering review process is extensive. It moves through multiple disciplines: engineering, utilities, traffic, parks, floodplain, and any of the accompanying environmental considerations. So while staff have committed to expedited review for this project, as reflected in the 3-week turnaround for the first submittal, the overall timeframe to reach permit approval is largely dependent on how quickly and completely the developer and the consultants address those comments. And based on prior submittals from the STP stage, revisions have taken multiple months, which is a factor, of course, in any overall project. So just to provide a little more context, that there's a lot of back and forth, and as Tim and Joe indicated, that it's an extremely complex project. But for our timeline review, I know there's been questions about expedited review. Expedited review on this has been, again, since this plan submittal in September of 2023, there hasn't been anything submitted until March 23rd. So
quickly jumping in, Jennifer, I would,
sure.
I am grateful for a highly competent team we have on the project. We've got a great team of world-class architects, engineers, landscape architects, urban planners, and third parties producing studies for us. So I am confident in their ability to perform here. Jumping back to the SDP, actually jumping back to submittals, another reason I'm confident in how this process is going to go from here is in January, in fact, we submitted our water and sanitary components of the construction documents as part of what is called a courtesy review. As Jennifer noted, the city staff did a great job of turning around comments in a 3-week time frame, and those comments were manageable, not extensive, and if that's any indication to what we expect to receive today for our formal first round review comments, I'm optimistic that we're going to make this make it through this construction document cleanup process through the planning department and building department for the vertical buildings in a reasonable amount of time. And with respect to the site plan and those turnaround times and that process, it actually required 8 rounds of review comments and cleanup. And that is a testament to the collaboration from both the city, citizen stakeholders, as well as staff.
What did you say earlier? It was 20 months in between.
At the city. Sorry, what was that, Jennifer? It was about an it required 8 months of cleanup on the SDP, meaning the site plan that has been submitted has been thoroughly vetted via a multi-year process with engagement from every stakeholder, and substantial changes there really aren't any substantial changes to what we've submitted today. We've changed some type of construction pipe from, you know, the prior submittal to now, but it's
Look,
pretty.
I think what we can all take away from this, and certainly the viewers can take away from this, is that this is a highly complex project. It has required a huge amount of work on the part of the city. It's been a huge amount of work on our part as well, with all of our consultants and designers. One of the problems that is pretty typical, I think, with governments is that, and it's nobody's fault, but there is this one size fits all approach to how things are done. So everybody has a 3 year, 3 year site development plans are pretty common. Denver has one, Broomfield has one, but it doesn't matter whether you're doing a 1 acre site with a couple of townhomes on a site that's already served by utilities, or you're undertaking a multi-million-dollar, highly complex project like this with a lake that's swimmable and fishable, and you're dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers and drainage. It's just unbelievably complex project, but yet it's supposed to fit within the same 3 year time frame that a simple project is. Now, when we did the SDP, went through that SDP process, we alerted the city back then that we were worried about that 3 years. We asked for 5. And, city just said, no, listen, this is the municipal code is 3 years. We don't have any flexibility on this. So, now we're confronted with, trying to do a hugely expensive and complex project in the same amount of time that you might allot for it could be as simple as a little strip center or a few townhomes or something on a site. So it's just the reality of what we're dealing with. But in the case here, it has created a problem for us from a financing standpoint, is that this is almost a $300 million project. And it relies on a public finance piece that is really all this public realm work that we're talking about. Now, typically cities do this work. A lot of you are familiar with downtown Westminster, for example. In Westminster, the city elected to do all this horizontal work that Jennifer so capably described. It's the foundation upon which you build everything else. But in this case, the way this deal was put together is that we're building that as the developers, so we've had to undertake this highly complex project within that time frame. The problem is that we're bumping up against the timeline, and as you can understand, the people that want to invest the $200+ million in this project in the form of bond sales, bank financing, investors, they want to know that the site development plan is not subject to revocation, because that just makes the project too risky. So we're not going to be able to finance the project unless or until we solve this issue with the viability of the site development plan. I would point out that the cities across the country are dealing with this issue because the current economic environment has really created all sorts of problems with these site development plans. Denver is in the process of extending some 200 site development plans for an additional 3 years because they want to make sure that these projects remain viable. They don't want to see the development pipeline dry up and have to force everybody to start all over again. So our project isn't necessarily being held up like in Denver. They're worried about the economics. That's not our issue here. But these site development plans are this one size fits all thing, and we just got to deal with it. So, we're hoping that all the many years of work and the millions of dollars invested by us and invested by the city doesn't get put at risk because of our inability to move forward with financing the project.
So Pat, I know so we have a lot of these responses
Right.
in your subsequent, so I didn't know it was going to go back and forth. So forgive me, but it's not a one size fits all. In fact, we pulled the last 7 big developments that we've done to varying complexity. Granted, none of them had a lake that people are going to get in that we'll have to manage, but we have specificity. I don't know if you want me to go into that, Pat, or do you want me to wait to that next question? But suffice it to say that we have never been asked for an extension. And so again, it's the process may seem to the developer to be clumsy. We've never been asked for an extension before. And in fact, even on our most complex flat irons and in baseline, from a residential and a commercial perspective, from the time the STP was submitted and approved, within 6 months, we haven't had one that went outside of that 6 months time frame. So again, Joe and Tim are well versed with a multitude of communities and the development cadence, but specifically for Broomfield, it isn't a one size fits all. It's very determinant upon what is submitted, the quality of the submittals, and then kind of that all hands on deck. We know how important this is to the community, but at the same time, with the extension, I mean, we really need to focus on that 18-month extension. I don't think anybody's saying that this, if they're able to do it, and if we're able to partner to make this happen, from that 18 months, the community has been seeking a walkable, lingering place, as Tim said, and that's in the closing dialogue. But we also need to determine the viability of the project as it stands now. And so we were able to dig into that a little bit. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But again, we're really looking at what happened between the STP submittal and the September 2026 deadline. So council has a lot to consider, and it's our role to provide the community and council data and facts so that they can make a well-informed decision. So I don't know if you want to go to why the construction hasn't started, or if you're feeling comfortable with that, what should have happened within those 3 months. And clearly the developer would ask for an extension because that's a lot to have to do in 5 remaining months until we get to the September deadline.
And I do appreciate that, Jennifer, and I do want to try to steer us back on track a little bit. I think this information, again, has been very helpful and very informative. But I do know that there are some other questions that I think people really want to know, so I would like to move forward on that. So, and I think we've gone significantly into the process about what's been submitted and where we are and why things are where they are. What I would like to do is kind of look at a best case scenario and understanding that things can change. So I'll ask Tim and Joe first. What is your best case timeline and a more realistic timeline for when site work could begin, if everything falls together in the best possible scenario?
Great question, Pat, and thanks for steering us towards the future here. Jumping back to what the plan was, our plan was to be issuing bonds this fall and commencing roughly 40 acres of site work. This deliberation that's happening right now with respect to the building permits and what is a building permit and what qualifies and is an extension necessary or not has slowed down progress with respect to the vertical private investments, as Joe noted earlier. So that's a negative. The positive is, as we were pointing towards, is the 40 acres of site improvements and multiple buildings have been submitted for permit review. The first formal review comments are anticipated back today. As I noted earlier, we already received some plan review comments on the courtesy review. So we're going to keep blowing and going. And as Jennifer noted, perhaps it's 5 rounds of comments. Maybe we do a bang up job and it's 3. Maybe we do an inferior job and it's 6. But we're in that final march to close permit approval and ultimately, therefore, bond sale. For the bond sale to be successful, we need to give our investors and our bondholders confidence that this site plan won't be pulled out from underneath us. And again, that was intended to be happening this fall. That is unrealistic at this point. Again, we're delaying the private vertical investment at this point, but that doesn't mean we can't still get going here expediently. And the hope is that this all gets worked out shortly. We're selling bonds in the first quarter of 2027, commencing site work in the first quarter of 2027. Just based on what we've heard from staff and Jennifer, that timeline is absolutely reasonable. And from there, like I noted earlier, the general cadence is you got a bunch of heavy work that needs to be done out there with site preparation. Once we get that heavy equipment out of the way and those deep utilities installed, we're looking at summer for those private vertical buildings to get underway, summer of next year. And then ultimately that would mean wrapping up work by late in 2029 and turning over this project cohesively, like we've spoke about, is so important about, not turning over the lake or plaza next to heavy equipment, rolling through the site. The intention has always been to turn this thing over cohesively and coherently, and have a big unveil there in a few short years. So that's the general timeline, and it's not really best case scenario. Again, we hope to be starting that district work this fall. So that would have been best case scenario. Again, spring 27, sort of our fallback plan, provided everything works out with this, the semantics of the language of what is a permit, et cetera. I think everybody wants this project done. The redevelopment and reimbursement agreement, meaning the public finance agreement, spelled this whole project out in pretty good specificity about what this is: the lake, the plaza, the ground floor commercial, the residential. We're just going to continue to put our heads down and execute on that vision.
Great, I appreciate that. And City Manager Hoffman, it looks like we've lost your video. Hopefully you can still hear us. And just oh, there you are. So I'll just throw it to you. Is there anything else that you'd like to add above what we've already talked about the typical timelines from the city's perspective?
Well, I think outside of the typical timelines, I mean, again, there's the desire to move forward, but then there's the sticky wicket of what happens for that extension. So council it's not an automatic. The 18-month extension needs to be something that the council agrees to. And while they are taking that 18-month consideration, there's several factors that they'll be weighing in. And one of them is it's really the opportunity to secure the residential development partner, as Joe and Tim have said before. And the developer also submitted materials that were intended to support the project's financial viability. So that was some of the questions that staff came back with when we got the 18-month submittal, to have those conversations. And part of that, again, it's incumbent upon us, the developers, any development, staff doesn't feel one way or the other way. We don't feel supportive of not supportive. But again, it's our fiduciary duty to review all of the information, timely information, from a viability perspective. And that's part of the conversation about the 18-month extension or not. So as Tim had indicated before, moving forward, maybe Joe and Tim can speak a little bit more specificity with the need to have the 18-month extension, or what happens. So again, we've conducted a review of the financial viability. We'll talk more about that at the meeting. We're having a public meeting on April 21st. I believe that Mr. Frederigill will be there. Staff will also be presenting, so that the community as well as council can be asked questions. Developer can be asked questions. We can ask for validation and confirmation about what that next step is. But again, it's not just the project plans, but it's also that financial viability. What's changed, under what circumstances it's changed. And perhaps we can get into that a little bit more when we, one of your questions specifically was what funding mechanisms does the city generally use for development projects? It seems like it's a good transition to go to that question. I don't know if that's, if you want to follow in any other order.
Yeah, sure. We can. I think we've talked. I did want to make sure, just to clarify, before we get into the funding mechanisms, that I did want to. We talked a lot about this 18-month extension, and and the the feeling in the community is when you hear 18-month extension, that means that nothing's going to happen for 18 months. And I don't think that's really the case. So just real quickly for clarification on that 18-month extension clause or phrase, I'll start with Tim and Joe. Can you explain what that actually relates to and what wouldn't change about the timeline?
Yeah. Thank you, Pat. Great question. The 18 months, much like the first 36 months, it's sort of an arbitrary time frame. In this case, what's happened is that there are investors, lenders, bondholders who are excited to finance this project. But what they're seeing is a scenario where that September date could come and council could call up the site development plan and say, we're pulling approval of this site development plan, right? So you theoretically be sitting there with a backhoe ready to start digging holes and doing $30 million worth of hard cost improvements, and suddenly find yourself without a site development plan approval. So the lenders, the bondholders, the investors, everyone wants the certainty that the entitlements to build the project are in place. And so unless or until that certainty is given to them, you can understand why they would be reluctant to want to advance funds for a project that would be at risk of getting stopped. So the 18 months isn't about a construction timeline, or it's not about digging a hole timeline. It's about ensuring the people that are financing this project that there is sufficient time to get building permits in and issued so that there's no risk of the site development plan being affected. So
specifically the private vertical investment.
Right.
So the public 40 acres of site preparation and spine infrastructure, floodway improvements, detention ponds, trail networks, you name it, that is not anticipated to push out 18 months for absolute clarity. Again, we were anticipating to launch that work this fall. Yeah. So this is a request that revolves around interpretation of what is a building permit, and it's nuanced, and everybody has their own opinion here. So without going down that rabbit hole for clarity, Pat, no, we are not anticipating pushing out the start date 18 months of kickoff of the Broomfield Town Square project.
Hey, Pat, I think it's an excellent point that Tim and Joe need to, from their financial contributors, the city feels exactly the same. And so making sure that updated numbers, updated bond runs, updated assumptions are all included in the conversation with council, much like a private developer wants to ensure that they have the opportunity to look at all stone unturned, so that they're confident in the money they're putting on the table. The city has $74 million that we've agreed to, up to $54 million for revenue generated from the project, and then another $20 million for the dedicated land. So it's a total deal of $74 million. Each time there's a modification, and an 18-month extension fits into that category, it behooves us to reevaluate to ensure, much like the private developers, that the deal makes sense and that the assumptions that are being made also make sense. They made sense in 2019. They made sense in 2023. Do they still make sense now in 2026 as we move through making decisions about that 18 months? So I appreciate Tim and Joe bringing up really the scrutinizing that their crew is going to be going through in order to secure that private financing. We feel the same way from a totality of circumstances.
Yeah, and that leads us into Jennifer's. Oh, go ahead. Did you have a?
No, I would only just say this, that the obligation to, provide the financing to the project is ours. It comes from lenders, it comes from investors, and it comes from bond sales. We're confident in the project. It pencils, those numbers work. The city is not taking risk on this project in the same way, of course. They are contributing the land to the deal for sure. The revenues that come, this $54 million, those revenues are only realized if the project gets built, right? So right now the land is lying fallow. It generates no sales tax. The land generates no property taxes. In fact, it costs the city money to own this land now, but we go in, we make the investment, the bondholders make the investment in building the project, and then the project generates sales tax and it generates property taxes. And then it's the bonds, those taxes support the bonds that are sold to build this thing. But note that the risk on those bonds belongs to the bondholders. It doesn't belong to the city, it belongs to the bondholders. So the bondholders, they want these bonds. Our lenders want to lend, our investors want to invest. They like this project. It's really more incumbent upon us who are guaranteeing those loans and are investing our own money to make sure that the numbers pencil. We wouldn't be willing to sign, for tens of millions of dollars of debt and invest, our company's money and our investors' money if we didn't think the project was going to provide a return and be a great investment. We feel very confident about that. Certainly, respect and honor the city wanting to understand how the project works, but ultimately the financial responsibility of the project lies on us and our investors, lenders, and bondholders.
And thank you, Joe. And again, that's a great segue into it also relies on our taxpayers, right? Because the original Urban Renewal Authority and the original financing agreement went through 2044. So that our contribution of that 54 million either reached 54 million or 2024 came. So in our agreement, it says whatever one comes first. So now when we review those bond runs, that has been extended in order to make the deal pencil. It's been included that we go to 2050. So the arbitrary nature of saying we still want the 54 million, even though we're starting 6 years late, but the bond folks are anticipating, in order to make it pencil, two different items. One is indicating that we're going to go from 2044 to 2050, which council hasn't been asked about. The agreement hasn't come back to them for that extension. And our long-range financial plan began to program those tax dollars going back into our general fund post 2044. So that requires on our side, in order to recalibrate that as well. So it's a piece that we need to continue to have a conversation about. Again, from a community perspective, and making sure that the assumptions that are included in the bond run are also what our assumptions are, right. As well as the mill levies, right? The bond runs are including 67 mills, but we're not sure what that calculation looks like. So we're very much looking to come back to understand between the school district's amount of the mills and CCOB's amount of the mills. There seems to be a gap. So those are two really big questions that behooves us as we move forward to be able to provide to our council so they're making a well-informed decision on those assumptions that you're making.
Yeah, I think
I do want to kind of steer us back a little bit, because we're talking a lot about financing and market reality, which is sort of the next section of our questions. And I know we've touched on that quite a bit. There's obviously a lot to unpack there and a lot to understand. What I'd like to do is really, for those folks who don't live in this development world and don't live in this type of a financial world, some of these phrases and key terminologies might be a little confusing. So I wanted to just back up a little bit, and first I'll go to Tim and Joe, and then I'll ask you, City Manager Hoffman. Tim and Joe, in simplest terms, if you can, just kind of reiterate how a project like this is paid for and what needs to be in place financially for construction to be able to begin.
Thanks, Pat. First and foremost, the site infrastructure needs to be delivered. And in this case, as Joe noted earlier, the developer will be delivering this public infrastructure for this project. As is often done in the state of Colorado and many other states, I believe 43 states have urban renewal law. Urban renewal agreements of this nature can be passed to deliver on betterments to the stakeholders in the community. And that's how this one's being financed for the public infrastructure that we anticipate delivering. So that would be capitalized via a bond sale. So as Joe noted, this property will produce property taxes, sales taxes, and what the agreement is that a portion of those revenues generated by this project is shared back to the project. And those revenues are sold on the front end of a project in the form of a bond. And that bond is what finances the infrastructure for the site. So that's the number one out of the gate. What we need to do is sell these bonds to deliver that public infrastructure. And to do that, the bondholders, the prospective bond purchasers want to know that this is a deal that is de-risked to the maximum extent possible. And so having things like site plan that's jeopardized or maybe called up by council and revoked is not beneficial. So we need to just clear that up so we can sell those bonds.
But I want to make it, in the simplest terms, there are three components to the finance. There is the bonds, which are funded by sales tax and property taxes. And all of that money is going to create this public realm, the streets, the sidewalks, the parks, the lakes, right? That money is being invested into property that is the public. It belongs to the public. The public has access to it. The vertical developments are privately financed, right? And so those parts are funded with debt and equity. Debt, everybody understands, that's a loan from a bank or similar. And equity just means investors. That means us. It means our partners putting in the millions of dollars required. But those are sort of your three buckets. You've got the public finance part, which pays for all that horizontal stuff that we've talked about today so that you can actually build the buildings. This site, it's interesting because it's such a large site, but only a fragment of it is really being used for private development. The footprint of the buildings is really small relative to the size of the site. It's an unbelievable amount of amenities for the public, a swim beach, a fishable, swimmable lake, paths and areas to walk around the lake and plazas and pop jets for the kids and public art. It's really a beautiful, project. And I want to take this opportunity as we approach, because I think we're running out of time here. I want to take this opportunity to remind everyone that this isn't our project. Like, we didn't cook this idea up and come and sell it to the city. We really view ourselves as facilitators of a project that the city wanted. The city invited us in to help them design this. We took them through an exercise of what they wanted. We did a design competition. The city selected the design. The design you see today is the design the city selected back then. And our job, and the way we look at it, is to facilitate this project that the city wanted so badly. The idea of a town square or a downtown for Broomfield has been talked about for decades, literally decades. I have documents going back 25 years, I think, or greater, on the need for this for the city. And this is a different kind of development, in that it's almost like a gift from the city to the city. All these things that they wanted, when we went through that design process with the stakeholders, with the citizens, it was a long, long list of all the things that they wanted and desired, and our job was to deliver that to them. And so that's what we've been trying to do. But everyone should remember that this is a collaborative project between us and the city. We're partners on it, and we're the facilitators trying to get it done. But this is a magnificent project. There's nothing like it in the Front Range. It is unbelievably well detailed, and we really, really want to deliver this project to the citizens of Broomfield. And I hope Broomfield leadership, both management and elected officials, remember and that how important this is, what the history of it is, why the citizens want it, and hang with us to get this big, complicated, expensive project done.
Joe, I appreciate that. I do. We only have a few minutes left, but there are a couple of other big questions I want to get to. But first, I want to go back to City Manager Hoffman and talking about financing, just kind of again to clarify in simple terms, if possible, from the city's perspective, what tools or approaches are typically used to support a major redevelopment like this.
Sure. And I very much appreciate Joe's mention that it's a gift from the city to the city, because it's always been determined to be an amenity. And so amenities cost money, and the city historically has said yes, right? So this is not a revenue generator. And going into not having it be a revenue generator, just basically developments, think about it as a layer cake. And so regardless of the cool factor or any of the other accoutrements for an amenity, it's really the capability of the city to say, how much are we going to reinvest? That's that 54 million. So part of that 54 million, generally you stay at 50%. So 50% of sales tax, 50% of use tax, 50% of the service expansion fee, which is unique to this project. Service expansion fee is $1 per square foot for residential. For joint use, 50 cents goes to the city and 50 cents goes to the school. So in this case, we're dedicating our 50 cents of every dollar back to the project. Excuse me. 50% of the city's lodging tax. And unusually in this project, this is to Tim's point of the gift from the city to the city in the 2019 agreement, it's dedicated 100% of the property tax. So that's unusual. We have not done that before. And we haven't done that since. So you have a multitude of layers. That is what the city is committing. And then you have 2 metro districts. And then you have a business improvement district, which goes to fund the operations of BTS. And then they also have a PIF, which is a public improvement fee. And although it's not a tax, it's a privately imposed fee on retail and dining transactions, but the 2.5 is added to the existing 1.5 sales tax. So again, you can understand what I'm talking about when I say a layered effect of city contributions from 50 to 100%. And then and again, that's that time frame we keep talking about. That's a much bigger conversation about it expiring in 2024 versus 2050. That's a pretty significant chunk of change there that we need to continue to talk about. And then moving all of those other metro districts, the bid, and then the PIF. And none of those are unusual. A PIF is unusual in Broomfield. We have one other development that has it's a 1% PIF. So we don't have a 2.5, but again, for the complexity and building and then operations, there's a whole host of financing tools that are available to any developer. It's really the percentage of contribution that changes per developer.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, Pat, I know you didn't want to go down that rabbit hole, but you opened the door. There's is a
Yes, go
fun
ahead.
one.
But we need be brief if you would, because I do have one more important question to get to.
Absolutely. I just wanted to put a bow on that segment with the fact that our team is highly capable when it comes to these public finance projects and have done 3 virtually identical financing arrangements in the past 7 years, including PIFs, metropolitan districts, business improvement districts, tax increment finance, and bond sales, with multiple vertical developments coming within a master plan. So I know everybody glazed over on the line, but we've got a great team and we're capable to execute. And the other part to just keep in mind is this project isn't going to happen without private capital infused into those public improvements as well, of which there's a substantial amount on this project. So.
Great, thank you. So the last question I really want, well, second to last perhaps, but this is one that a lot of people ask us about. The former Safeway building is very visible. People see it. And knowing that it's tied into the Town Square project, just if you would briefly, Tim and Joe, give us an idea of how that building fits into the overall plan. And assuming everything goes forward as we expected to, what would be the time frame that people might see some activity on that specific building, on that specific part of the plan?
Sure. We could certainly appreciate everyone being tired of looking at that building, sitting there unused for so long. But what everybody has to remember is that, the city, in choosing the plan for this project, wanted the Safeway building integrated into it. And it is fully and inextricably integrated into this plan. All that horizontal work that we've talked about so much here today, the infrastructure, the building is entirely dependent on this. It cannot be developed, at least under the current plan. You cannot develop this building separately from all of that $30 million of infrastructure work. So, everything from, storage of stormwater to the connections between the Safeway building and the site. Very expensive, very complicated, very beautiful connection being created between those 2 sites. All that has to be built. The Safeway building, at least as envisioned in the plan that everybody's been working on these many years, is entirely dependent upon it. And so we can't just go over there and open it up, all by itself in a vacuum, and then end up tearing it all apart again and putting it in the middle of a construction site while the balance of the project gets done. From the beginning, we have made it very, very clear that this is going to be a joint opening, right? That we have said from the beginning, this project needs to open together and at once. We do not want to end up, and I don't want to upset anyone here, but downtown Westminster is only about 20% complete after all this time. And it looks like decades more of construction before that project can be complete. What we have said on this one is that it has to come together. It's one big project. It needs to open together. Now, listen, Tim can talk more about the construction schedule. We can certainly finish the Safeway building because it's an existing building. We can certainly finish it better sooner than some of the other vertical development, but the site infrastructure work has to be completed first. So that's, maybe you can talk a little bit more about, from a pure construction standpoint, how all that works.
That's fair. Yeah, it's Safeway building's been unoccupied and uninhabited for many years now, and services need to be reestablished. Power, gas, the storm that handles the over 2 acres of surface parking that's already out there is being the storm sewer system is being rebuilt, including new storm ponds. There's multiple new storm ponds as part of our public finance package. The water service needs to be reinforced. The prior use is not compatible with our future use. You're going to have, in all likelihood, over a dozen different food and beverage concepts within that building. And you can imagine the loads that's required to deliver. And we've delivered food halls. Joe's delivered food halls. It's not an insignificant undertaking, and they require a ton of backbone. So like Joe said, you can go start ripping apart the building and building out tenant improvements. But the reality is you still have to tie egress to the north, storm sewer to the north, water sewer from multiple directions, as well as resurfacing the surface parking lot, the signage package. All of these things relate, and in many cases are part of the public finance package. So it is a project that needs to go together. We're leasing right now actively, so this is our call to action. If we can have one of the positives I hope to come out of this meeting is if there's anybody listening that has interest in being a part of the Broomfield Town Square from a commercial perspective, whether it be at this Safeway building, which is going to be phenomenal, but also the 36,000 square feet of retail in the public plaza, please reach out to us, broomfieldtownsquare.net. You can also find those listings on LoopNet or Crexi, CREXI, and that'll direct you to our commercial brokerage team. There's been, quote unquote, a significant amount of pent-up demand, so we are certain that the businesses that you guys represent here at the Chamber are excited about this project. They are lining up, and again, we're excited to announce some of those anchors here in the near future. Thanks, Pat.
Great. And Jennifer, I'll toss it over to you. From the city's perspective, what do you think about that building within the broader town square vision, especially given the public attention to it?
It's key. People don't call asking about anything else on that development. They call asking about the Safeway. And again, back to that community amenity, that's why we've invested in order to do the mold remediation and to keep the roof, and eagerly awaiting any efforts whatsoever that can be modified. And again, when we were doing the due diligence on the bond runs, we're eager to find out more from Tim and Joe. We haven't gotten the update on some of the packaging and space that's being taken, indicating that there's a gym. We're eager to hear more about that. I think it's Tim, I see you going, what is it? Yeah, it's like an 18,000 square foot gym. So eagerly awaiting.
Not quite, but not quite, but sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Safeway buildings, if you're familiar, most of these folks on the call today are familiar with who the demographic is in Broomfield, and that is replete with ample households of folks pushing strollers. And so one of our partners at one of our current properties is an indoor children's play facility meets parent lounge. And we're excited about their prospect of joining us here at the Broomfield Town Square. And coupled with that is an entertainment use, which is actually indoor. No other way to put it. It's an indoor baseball related facility. So it is entertainment related use, but those will both be operated by the same partner, occupying about 12,000 square feet of the ultimate 50,000 square feet of the Safeway building.
Yeah, and we're excited. Sorry,
Jennifer, I did want to give Jennifer a chance to complete her thought there, though.
Again, from our perspective, it's less about the energy and vibrancy. I mean, that's a subsequent conversation. Ours right now is about the fiscal sustainability, and looking and reviewing those bond runs and having, our bond partner, as the community knows, we just got through with 3 really significant bonds. So we're well versed in what it takes, what the components are, and the time frame. So again, from a fidelity perspective, I love talking about the project and the vibrancy and the energy and how cool it's going to be and leasing up. But the fiduciary duty from a staff perspective is less about that, and it's more about ensuring that the subsidizing of the project remains intact. And so when we look at the uses, we're also looking at the square footage, what it's going to generate, and how that all pencils out. So again, all of the, from a city manager's and a team's perspective, it's not the sexy stuff, right? It's all about the now, midterm, and in the future. And we appreciate the partnership with Tim and Joe, and I'm hoping and confident that there's less communication about this is council's delay, because it is unequivocally not. And it certainly isn't a staff delay. So these questions are questions that together we will be able to figure out, and have a more transparent conversation, Pat, on the 21st for the community. And a lot of these questions can be asked then as well.
And you mentioned the 21st, so my last quick question for both of you is, the public meeting on the 21st, but going beyond that, how do residents find out the latest about the project, key milestones and so forth from the city's perspective? How are you communicating that?
Sure. Well, so we have the Broomfield Boys page, and again, we're not marketing it, and so Tim and Joe have a different approach on social media, and theirs is much more of a marketing. The project. From a Broomfield perspective, ours is timelines, what's happening, what comes next, what are the future conversations, and what are those milestones from a time commitment, particularly as it relates right now to that 18-month extension, and what goes into making that decision.
Okay, thank you. And Joe and Tim, I'll ask you the same question. How do you see your role in communicating progress and updates to the community?
Well, we have a website, BroomfieldTownSquare.net. We're active on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram. We're keeping the community advised that way.
And then events like this. I mean, this is part of the reason that this event is happening today is, again, continue to maintain communication with the community. We've been doing these updates at City Council every 6 months. We were anticipated to be on the February agenda to present again at council. That meeting or our presentation got canceled. So this is a perfect opportunity to, again, touch base with the community. And we appreciate you all recording this and making it publicly available, because it's, again, it's a tough challenge to just continue to push out information. But we had a magazine article that just got pushed out in, I believe, February. And I think it's a all channels approach from this point forward to, again, just build that excitement. Thanks, Pat.
Great. Well, with that, we're over time, but I think this was great information, and I really appreciate you all being here on this call. I want to thank the development team and the city manager Hoffman for being part of this conversation and taking the time to walk through what is very clearly a complex project. I want to thank everybody who joined us as attendees today. Our goal with the conversation was to provide clarity and context, and we hope this has been helpful. We'll be sharing a recording of this webinar through the Chamber's website, social media, and our newsletter, so the community can stay informed. So thank you again. We look forward to continuing to keep the community updated as the project moves forward. Thank you all again.